peace, gratitude, and highest heart love. Honor to the world. Welcome to the YouTube live reading of The Ways of White Folks by Langston Hughes. I'm your moderator and narrator, Uriel Neveu. And today, it's a beautiful day. We pick up at chapter 10, Little Dog. Little Dog. Miss Braggs had a little apartment all alone on a 4-story block just where Oakwood Drive curved past the park and the lake. Across the street beneath her window, kids skated in winter, and in the spring the grass grew green. In summer, lovers walked and necked by the lake in the moonlight. In fall, brown and red gold leaves went skithering into the water when the wind blew. Miss Briggs came home from work every night at 8, unless she went to the movies or to the Women's Civics Club. On Sunday evenings, she sometimes went to a lecture on theosophy, but she was never one to gad about Miss Briggs. Besides, she worked too hard. She was the head bookkeeper for the firm of Wilkins and Bryant, Wood, Coal, and Coke. And since 1930, when they had cut down the staff, she had only one assistant. Just two of them now to take care of the books, bills, and everything. But Miss Briggs was very efficient. She had been head bookkeeper for 21 years. Wilkins and Bryant didn't know what they would do without her. Miss Briggs was proud of her record as a bookkeeper. Once the city hall had tried to get her, but Wilkins and Bryant said, "No, indeed, we can pay as much as the city, if not more. You stay right here with us." Miss Briggs stayed. She was never a person to move about much or change jobs. Peace. Hi, it's Harlow. Thank you for being here and reading with us. The Ways of White Folks, Chapter 10, Little Dog, page 162. As a young girl, she had studied very hard in business school. She never had much time to go out. A widowed mother, more or less dependent on her then, later became completely dependent, paralyzed. Her mother had been dead for 6 years now. Perhaps it was the old woman's long illness that had got Miss Briggs in the habit of staying home every night in her youth instead of going out to the theater or to parties. They had never been able to afford a maid even after Miss Briggs became so well paid, for doctors' bills were much a drain. And in those last months, a trained nurse was needed for her mother. God rest her soul. Now, alone, Miss Briggs usually ate her dinner in the Rosebud Tea Shop. A number of genteel businesswomen ate there, and the colored waiters were so nice. She had been served by Joe or Perry, flat-footed old Negro gentlemen, for 3 or 4 years now. They knew her taste and would get the cook to make her special dishes for her if she wasn't feeling well. After dinner, with a walk of 5 or 6 blocks from the Rosebud, the park would come into view. With its trees and lights, the Lyle apartments loomed up. A pretty place to live, facing the park. Miss Briggs had moved there after her mother died. Trying to keep house alone was just a little too much, and there was no man in view to marry. Most of them would want her only for her money now, at her age anyway. To move with another woman, Miss Briggs thought, would be sort of sacrilege so soon after her mother's death. Besides, she really didn't know any other woman who, like herself, was without connections. Almost everybody had somebody. Miss Briggs reflected. Everyone Every woman she knew had either a husband or sisters or a friend of long standing with whom she resided. But Miss Briggs had nobody at all. Nobody. Not that she thought about it very much. Miss Briggs was too used to facing the world alone, minding her own business and going on her own way. But one summer, while returning from Michigan, where she had taken her 2 weeks' rest, as she came through Cleveland on her way from the boat to the station there, she happened to pass a dog shop with a window full of fuzzy little white dogs. Miss Briggs called to the taxi man to stop. She got out and went in. When she came back to the taxi, she carried a little white dog named Flips. At least the dealer said he had been calling it Flips because its ears were so floppy. They just flip flop. Flip and flop, the man said, smiling at the tall middle aged woman. How much is he? Miss Briggs asked, holding the puppy up. I'll let you have him for $25, the man said. Miss Briggs put the puppy down. She thought that was a pretty steep price. But there was something about Flips that she liked, so she picked him up again and took him with her. After all, she allowed herself very few indulgences, and somehow this summer Miss Briggs sort of hated going back to an empty flat, even if it did overlook the park. Or maybe it was because it overlooked the park that had made it so terrible a place to live lately. Miss Briggs had never felt lonely, not very lonely in the old house after her mother died. Only when she moved to the flat did her loneliness really come on her. There were some nights there, especially summer nights, when she thought she couldn't stand it to sit in her window and see so many people going by, couple by couple, arms locked, or else in groups, laughing and talking. Miss Briggs wondered why she knew no one, male or female, to walk out with, laughing and talking. She knew only the employees she worked with, and with whom she associated but little, for she hated to have people know her business. She, of course, the members of the She knew, of course, the members of the Women's Civics Club, but in a cultural sort of way. The warmth of friendship seldom mellowed her contacts there. Only one or two of the club women had ever called on her. Miss Briggs always believed in keeping her distance, too. Her mother used to say she'd been born poor but proud and would stay that way. Folks have to amount to something before Clara takes up with them. Old Mrs. Briggs always said, men'll have a hard time getting Clara. Men did. Now, with no especial attractions to make them keep trying, Miss Briggs, tall and rail like, found herself left husbandless. And at an age when youth had gone. So, in her 45th year, coming back from a summer boarding house in Michigan, Miss Briggs bought herself a little white dog. When she got home, she called on the janitor and asked him to bring up a small box for Flips. The janitor, a tow-headed young Swede, brought her a grapefruit crate from the A&P. Miss Briggs put it in the kitchen floor for Flips. She told the janitor to bring her 2 or 3 times a week a dime's worth of dog meat or bones and leave it on the back porch where she could just find it when she came home. On other nights, Flips ate dog biscuits. Flips and Miss Briggs soon settled on a routine. Peace, guys. Eyes Heartland. Each evening, when she got home, she would feed him. Then she would take him for a walk. This gave Miss Briggs an excuse for getting out, too. In the warm weather, she would walk around the little lake fronting her apartment with Flips on a string. Sometimes she would even smile at other people walking around the lake with dogs at night. It was nice. It was nice the way dogs made things friendly. It was nice the way people with dogs smiled at her occasionally because she had a dog too. But whenever, as seldom happened, someone in the park, dog or no dog, tried to draw her into conversation, Miss Briggs would move on as quickly as she could without being rude. You could never tell just who people were, Miss Briggs thought, or what they might have in their minds. No, you shouldn't think of taking up with strange people in parks. Besides, she was the head bookkeeper for Wilkins and Bryant, and these days of robberies and kidnappings, maybe they just wanted to find out when she went for the payroll or how much cash the firm kept on hand. Miss Briggs didn't trust people. Always by 10 o'clock, she was back with Flips in her flat. A cup of hot milk, then maybe with a little in a saucer for Flips, and to bed. In the morning, she would let Flips run down the back steps for a few minutes. Then she gave him more milk, left a pan of water, and went to work. A regular routine for Mrs. Briggs. Miss Briggs took care of Flips with great seriousness. At night, when she got back from the Rosebud tea shop, she fed him biscuits. Or, if it were dog meat night, she looked out on the back porch for the package the janitor was paid to leave. That is, Miss Briggs allowed the Swede 50 cents a week to buy bones. He could keep the change. But one night, the meat was not there. Miss Briggs thought perhaps he had forgotten. Still, he had been bringing it regularly for nearly 2 years. Maybe the warm spring this year made the young janitor listless. Miss Briggs mused. She fed Flips biscuits. But 2 days later, another dog meat night, the package was not there. This is too much, thought Miss Briggs. Come on, Flipsy. Let's go downstairs and see. I'm sure I gave him 50 cents this week to buy your bones. Miss Briggs and the little white beast went downstairs to ask why there was no meat for a dog to eat. When they got to the janitor's quarters in the basement, they heard a mighty lot of happy laughing and kids squalling and people moving. They didn't sound like Swedes either. Miss Briggs was a bit timid about knocking, but she finally mustered up courage with Flips there beside her. A sudden silence fell inside. You, Leroy, a voice said. Go to the door. A child's feet came running. The door opened like a flash, and a small colored boy stood there grinning. Where, where's the janitor? Miss Briggs asked, taken back. You mean my papa? Asked the child, looking at the gaunt white lady. He's here, and off he went to call his father. Surrounded by children, a tall, broad shouldered Negro of perhaps 40, gentle of face and a little stooped, came to the door. Good evening, he said pleasantly. Why, are you the janitor? Stammered Miss Briggs. Flips had already begun to jump up on him with friendly mien. Yes'm, I'm the new janitor, said the Negro in a softly beautiful voice, kids all around him. Is there something I can help you to do? Well, said Miss Briggs, I'd like some bones for my little dog. He missed his meat 2 times now. Can you get him some? Yes'm, sure can, said the new janitor. If all the stores ain't closed. He was so much taller than Miss Briggs, and she had to look up at him. I'd appreciate it, said Miss Briggs. And she went back upstairs. She heard the new janitor calling in his rich voice, Lord, you reckon the meat store's still open? And a woman's voice and a lot of children answered him. It turned out the store was closed. So Miss Briggs gave the Negro janitor 10 cents and told him to have the meat there the next night when she came home. Flips, you shan't starve, she said to the little white dog. New janitor or no new janitor. Woof! Said Flips. But the next day, when she came home, there was no meat on the back porch either. Miss Briggs was puzzled and a little hurt. Had the Negro forgotten? Scarcely had she left the kitchen, however, when someone knocked on the back door and there stood the colored man with the meat. He was almost as old as Miss Briggs. She was certain of it, looking at him. Not a young man at all, but he was awfully big and brown and kind looking, so sort of sure about life as he handed her the package. I thought some other dog might get it if I left it on the porch, said the colored man, so I kept it downstairs until you came. Miss Briggs was touched. Well, thank you very much, she said. When the man had gone, she remembered that she had not told him how often to get the meat for the dog. The next night he came again with bones, and every night from then on. Miss Briggs did not stop him or limit him to 3 nights a week. Just after 8, whenever she got home, up the back porch steps, the Negro would come with the dog meat. Sometimes there would be 2 or 3 kids with him, pretty little brown, black, rather dirty kids, Miss Briggs thought, who were shy in front of her, but nice. Once or twice during the spring, the janitor's wife instead brought the dog meat up on Saturday nights. Flips barked rudely at her. Miss Briggs didn't take to the creature either. She was fat and yellow, and certainly too old to just keep on having children, as she evidently did. The janitor himself was so solid and big and strong. Miss Briggs felt better when he brought her the bones for the dog. She didn't like his wife. That June, on warm nights, as soon as she got home, Miss Briggs would open the back door and let the draft blow through. She could hear the janitor better coming from up the rear stairs when he brought the bones, and of course she never said more than good evening to him and thank you. Or, here's $1 for the week. Keep the change. Flips ate an awful lot of meat that spring. Your little dog's a regular meat hound, the janitor said one night as he handed her the bones, and Miss Briggs blushed, for no good reason. He does eat a lot, she said. Good night. As she spread the bones out on the paper for the dog, she felt her hands were trembling. She left Flips eating and went into the parlor, but found that she could not keep her mind on the book she was reading. She kept looking at the big, kind face of the janitor in her mind, perturbed that it was a Negro face and that it stayed with her so. The next night, she found herself waiting for the dog meat to arrive with more anxiety than Flips himself. When the colored man handed it to her, she quickly closed the door before her face got red again. Funny old white lady, thought the janitor as he went back downstairs to his basement full of kids, just crazy about that dog, he added to his wife. I ought to tell her it ain't good to feed a dog so much meat. What do you care, long as she wants to? Asked his wife. The next day in the office, Miss Briggs found herself making errors over the books. That night she hurried home to be sure and be there on time when he brought the dog meat up, in case he came early. What's the matter with me? She said sharply to herself, rushing this way just to feed Flips. Whatever is the matter with me? But all the way through the warm, dusky streets, she seemed to hear the janitor's deep, dusky, deep voice saying good evening to her. Then, when the Negro really knocked on the door with the meat, she was trembling so that she could not go to the kitchen to get it. Leave it right there by the sink, she managed to call out. Thank you, Joe. She heard the man going back downstairs, sort of humming to himself, a kid or so following him. Miss Briggs felt as if she were going to faint, but Flips kept jumping up on her, barking for his meat. Oh, Flips, she said, I'm so hungry. She meant to say, you're so hungry. She repeated it. You're so hungry. Huh, Flipsy dog? And from the way the little dog barked, he must have been hungry. He loved meat. The next evening, Miss Briggs was standing in the kitchen when the colored man came with the bones. Lay them down, she said. Thank you, trying not to look at him. But as he went downstairs, she watched through the window his beautifully heavy body finding the rhythm of the steps, his big brown neck moving just a little. Get down, she said sharply to Flips barking for his dinner. To herself, she said earnestly, I've got to move. I can't be worried being so far from a meat shop or from where I eat my dinner. I think I'll move downtown where the shops are open at night. I can't stand this. Most of my friends live downtown anyway. But even as she said it, she wondered what friends she meant. She had a little white dog named Flips. That was all. And she was acquainted with other people who worked at Wilkins and Bryant, but she had nothing to do with them. She was the head bookkeeper. She knew a few women in the Civics Club fairly well, and the Negro waiters at the Rosebud shop, and this janitor. Miss Briggs decided that she could not bear to have this janitor come upstairs with a package of bones for Flips again. She was sure he was happy down there with his portly yellow wife and his house full of children. Let him stay in the basement, then where he belonged. She never wanted to see him again, never. That next night, Miss Briggs made herself go to a movie before coming home, and when she got home, she fed Flips dog biscuits. That week, she began looking for a new apartment, a small one, for her dog and just her for her to and the dog. Fortunately, there were plenty to be had. What with people turned out for not being able to pay their rent, which would never happen to her. Thank God. She had saved her money. When she found an apartment, she deposited the first month's rent at once. On her coming Saturday afternoon off, she planned to move. Friday night, when the janitor came up with the bones, she decided to be just a little pleasant to him. Probably she would never see him again. Perhaps she would give him $1 for a tip. Then something to remember her by. When he came upstairs, she was aware a long time of his feet approaching, coming up, 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 bringing bones for her dog. Flips began to bark. Miss Briggs went to the door. She took the package in one hand, and the other she offered the bill. Thank you so much for buying bones for my little dog, she said. Here is $1 for your trouble. Keep it all. Much obliged, ma'am, said the astonished janitor. He had never seen Miss Briggs so generous before. Thank you, ma'am. He sure do eat a heap o' bones, your little dog. He almost keeps me broke buying bones, Miss Briggs said, holding the door. True, said the janitor, but I reckon you don't have much other expenses on hand, do you? No family and all like me. You're right, answered Miss Briggs. But a little dog is so much company, too. Guess they are, ma'am, yet said the janitor, turning to go. Well, good night, Miss Briggs. I'm much obliged. Good night, Joe. As his broad shoulders and tall brown body disappeared down the stairs, Miss Briggs slowly turned her back and shut the door, and put the bones on the floor for Flipsy. Then suddenly she began to cry. The next day she moved away as she had planned to do. The janitor never saw her any more. For a few days, the walkers in the park beside the lake wondered where a rather gaunt, middle aged woman who used to come out at night with a little white dog had gone. But in a very short while, the neighborhood had completely forgotten her. The Ways of White Folks by Langston Hughes. Peace, peace. Gratitude. Thank you for reading. That's chapter 10. Little Dog. So, you see, she didn't even know what she felt. She just knew she had to leave. The Ways of White Folks. I love you. Highest heart love. I will see you soon, y'all. Y'all have a wonderful day. Peace, peace. Thank you so much for the love. Peace.